A deep, gritty British male narrator. The tone is authoritative, but cynical and slightly sarcastic, like a storyteller revealing a disgusting secret. He sounds serious when describing death, but wishy when mocking Hollywood myths. Clear articulation, slow pacing, atmospheric. The nose knows. The Middle Ages, a time of chivalry, romance, and towering stone castles. We've all seen the movies. We imagine brave knights riding through pristine forests and maidens waving from spotless towers. It looks majestic. But Hollywood lied to you, because if you actually invented a time machine and stepped out into a medieval city like London or Paris in the 14th century, the first thing that would hit you wouldn't be the sight of a cathedral. It would be the smell. A stench so powerful, so thick, and so layered that it would likely knock a modern human unconscious. It was an evil that affected the whole of medieval society, both rich and poor. Hygiene and public health were completely absent, and the concepts of bacteria or antibiotics were centuries away from being discovered. Welcome to Cobblestone Secrets. Today, we are taking a deep breath, actually, maybe don't breathe, as we dive into the filth, the disease, and the absolute squalor of the Middle Ages. We are going to find out why, statistically speaking, you wouldn't survive a single week in a medieval city. Home sweet hell. The floor is lava and vomit. Let's start with where you live. You might think, well, the streets are dirty, but at least my house is clean. Think again. Most medieval floors were made of white clay. To make them softer, people covered them with rushes, dried grasses, or reeds. Sounds rustic and charming, doesn't it? Like a farmhouse trend on Pinterest. But here is the catch. While the top layer of rushes might be changed occasionally, the bottom layers were usually left untouched, sometimes for several years. Imagine that. A carpet you haven't vacuumed or changed in a decade. What is hiding in that festering compost heap beneath your feet? The records tell us exactly what was down there. It was a cocktail of spit, vomit, and urine from both humans and dogs. Add to that spillage from ale, scraps of meat and fish bones. You are essentially walking, sleeping, and eating on top of a rotting biological weapon. It is no wonder that infections spread quickly. In a world with no inoculations and no cures, your own living room was a death trap. The streets of shame. Step outside and it gets worse. As populations grew, towns expanded rapidly to accommodate more people, leading to massive overcrowding. The streets were not paved with gold. They were open sewers. There was no underground plumbing. When you had to go, you went in a bucket. And where did the contents of that bucket go? Out the window. Excrement, rubbish, and animal carcasses were simply thrown into the streets or dumped into the rivers. This created a buffet for disease-carrying rodents. Rats and mice thrived in these environments, creating the perfect conditions for bacteria to breed. And remember, you drank from that river, the same river where your neighbor just threw a dead pig. It is a miracle anyone survived at all. The bread that burns, St. Anthony's fire. Hungry? Let's grab a bite. Bread was the staple of the medieval diet, but in the Middle Ages, even your toast could kill you. There was a constant presence known as St. Anthony's fire. It sounds like a cool superhero name, but the reality was pure body horror. This disease, also known as ergotism, was caused by eating rye grain contaminated with a specific mold. In times of poverty and hunger, people had no choice. Eating contaminated grain seemed a better alternative than dying of starvation. But the price was high. The fire refers to the burning sensation victims felt in their hands and feet. This was caused by the constriction of blood vessels. In later stages, gangrene would set in. First, the fingers and toes would turn black. Then, they would simply drop off. You could literally watch your own body fall apart, piece by piece. And it played tricks on the mind. The poisoning caused convulsions and hallucinations. Those affected appeared to be crazed. Historians now believe this hallucinogenic bread might explain the bizarre dancing epidemics of the 14th century, and perhaps even the accusations that led to the Salem witch trials later on. Imagine that. A whole town tripping on moldy bread, dancing until they collapse while their fingers turn black. That is the medieval reality, the living death, leprosy. If there is one disease that symbolizes the fear of the Middle Ages, it is leprosy. It was known as the living death. Leprosy carries a stigma of uncleanliness and decay. It is caused by a bacterium that enters the lungs, usually from inhaling droplets when an infected person coughs or sneezes. The bacteria attack the nerves, causing sufferers to lose their sense of feeling. This sounds like a superpower, no pain, but it is a curse. Any damage to fingers and toes goes unnoticed, becoming infected and ulcerated. Eventually, the cartilage is absorbed by the body, and the digits shorten and disappear. But here is the twist. Medieval society was deeply religious. While lepers were shunned, many believed they were enduring purgatory on earth. This meant they were closer to God and would go directly to heaven when they died. Rich noblemen would even fund special hospitals called leprosaria to care for them. Why? Because being kind to a leper was a VIP ticket to heaven for the rich donor. It was spiritual capitalism at its finest. The apocalypse arrives, the Black Death. But all of these horrors were just a warm-up act for the main event. Late 1347. The most devastating pandemic in human history began. It started with what might be the first instance of biological warfare. Mongol forces catapulted plague-infested corpses into the Italian trading station of Caffa. From there, 12 ships docked in Messina, Sicily. Most sailors were already dead. Those alive were covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. They were death ships. The Black Death was ruthless. Transmitted by fleas and rats, it attacked the lymph nodes. Swellings called buboes appeared in the armpits and groin. Then came the vomiting of blood, organ failure, and a slow, torturous death. In 5 years, it killed over 200 million people. England lost half of its inhabitants. The death toll was so high that they ran out of people to dig graves. Archaeologists today still find mass graves, proving how ill-equipped society was to handle the sheer volume of bodies. If you lived in 1348, flip a coin. Heads, you live. Tails, you die screaming in a pool of your own blood. Those were your odds. When the cure is worse than the disease. So, you are sick, you have the plague, or syphilis, or just a bad fever. You go to a doctor. Big mistake. Medieval medical knowledge relied on superstition and alchemy. Doctors believed health was based on the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you were sick, your humours were out of balance. The solution? Let it out. Bloodletting was the go-to cure. They used leeches or knives to cut veins. Feeling faint? That means it's working. Or perhaps you need cautery. This was used to stop bleeding, often in tooth extractions or amputations. A piece of metal would be heated to a high temperature and applied directly to the wound. It would stop the bleeding, yes, but the tissue damage and the pain were unimaginable. And then there was syphilis, the French disease. It caused flesh to fall off faces and urination so painful that metal rods had to be inserted into the bladder. The cure? Mercury. Yes, the poisonous heavy metal. They made ointments and pills from it. It caused sweating, vomiting, and teeth loss, which doctors thought was the body cleansing itself. In reality, the patients were dying of mercury poisoning, not the syphilis. Conclusion. Be thankful for plumbing. Life in the Middle Ages was hard. Death was a constant companion. From the floor you slept on to the bread you ate, everything was trying to kill you. We often look back at the past with rose-tinted glasses. We see the castles and the kings, but we forget the rats, the rot, and the stench. So, the next time you complain about your Wi-Fi being slow or your coffee being cold, just remember, at least you aren't eating moldy rye bread on a floor made of 10-year-old vomit while waiting for a leech to balance your humors. Thank you for surviving this episode of Cobblestone Secrets. If you have the stomach for it, check out our other video on the dark truth of Victorian workhouses. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and wash your hands. Seriously, go wash them.